Hello, everyone. I think that I am live. Just kind of checking to see. Um, Perfect. Hello, everyone. I am just checking everything to see if things are working, as technology did not work very well last time. Um, all right. Happy Wednesday. I hope that everyone is having a great last Wednesday of June. So crazy. I feel like the time has just been flying, and I hope that you've been enjoying your summer and the warm weather and activities and, being able to just really appreciate this time of year. I know I certainly am trying to get outside as much as possible and just feed my soul and live off of the sunshine because I'm solar powered. So today, again, another exciting topic. What a surprise that I'm excited for it. But it is one that is near and dear to my heart recently. I mean, it has been for a while, but I'm really trying to get the word out there on caffeine. So I am a caffeine lover. I'm a coffee lover. I lived off of coffee in my college years, my 20s. It was copious amounts probably that I had. Obviously, very limited during pregnancies. But then afterwards, I really started to kind of ramp it up again. And now I'm only once in a while. I did have some today, I will say, which is funny because we're talking about it. Um, but this topic is something that really needs to get out there for people to hear. Just because caffeine and coffee is something that can either enhance performance, enhance your energy levels, or it can really, really actually worsen symptoms for people. So, I'm going to be talking about how and why your symptoms could actually become worse when consuming caffeine. So, that is today's topic. I would love to hear if anyone is watching or when you're watching. Put a comment down below and let me know, are you a coffee drinker? Do you have caffeine as a daily consumption? Is it something that you feel like you have to live off of to keep you going and get you going? I'm very, very curious. Or maybe you're someone who's like nixed caffeine from your daily routine. I would love to hear that too, and hear how has that been going for you? I personally, when I was doing my elimination diet, wasn't you weren't allowed to have caffeine on it. So I got rid of that, and now I just have it very limited in my diet. So it's maybe like once or twice a week that I will consume it, and it's not in the same quantities that I used to either. And I've noticed a huge difference in my energy levels, actually, and my sleep, and all of that. So I'm going to get into that now. But again, if you have any questions while I am chatting, please put it in the comment section and I will address your questions. All right. So if you're like anything like a lot of our population, coffee or caffeine is a staple, especially with the go 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 of our society. It seems to be the fuel that gets people and their day started. Uh, but if you are consuming caffeine every day, the benefits are more than likely not working like they should be. And they could actually be making your symptoms worse, especially if you have fibromyalgia, chronic disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune conditions as well. So, for those of us with any of the above that is mentioned, caffeine is likely not helping us. So, beverages and foods containing caffeine, such as coffee, soda pop, however you say it, and energy drinks, as well as chocolate. Um, there are benefits to chocolate too, and it's in such smaller quantities. But those are things that contain caffeine. So, anything that is containing caffeine that is adding to your day could actually be backfiring. So, unfortunately, Caffeine depletes something called adenosine in our mitochondria. So, our mitochondria, if you remember from videos past, they are the energy and powerhouses of our cells. So, they help provide our body with energy so that they can do all the things that they need to do. Our body can function, it can move, we can talk, we can think, we can be humans and do what we need to do. So, adenosine is a critical component of ATP, which is that energy. It's the body source of energy for our cells. Adenosine is also an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it also makes you tired and sleepy. And throughout the day, it starts to build up in the body and well into the evening. And it's a major signal for your body to say, hey, it's time to go to sleep. And it lets your brain know it's time to go to sleep. So, it's similar to melatonin, where melatonin, increases more in that evening so that your body can actually sleep. And the more adenosine you have floating around in your brain and binding to adenosine receptors in your brain, the more tired you're going to be. So, caffeine actually has a similar shape to the structure of adenosine, and it can fit into the adenosine receptors in our brain. And so, when caffeine it can bind to those receptors, it blocks adenosine from attaching, making you feel energized initially, right? So adenosine, when it attaches to those receptors, it's letting our body know we're starting to wind down. We're getting a little tired. We need to go to bed. So caffeine blocks it, binds, and we're like, we have energy. Oh my gosh, yay. But for someone who doesn't drink caffeine normally, this can be an enhancement, it can be an energizer. We're all good. For those who drink caffeine regularly, once the caffeine wears off, the adenosine comes back and it actually hits hard. It, starts to flood those receptors in the brain. And we get that caffeine crash. So I don't know, if you drink caffeine in the morning and you have a crash later in the day, it's likely because you've had that caffeine crash because the adenosine now is flooding the receptors in your brain. And your mood gets affected, your energy, your performance, those all take a hit. So if you are someone who gets that afternoon crash and you're drinking caffeine in the morning, we might want to rethink this, right? And a lot of times we're like, I need another caffeine boost to help me. And when you get caffeine after noon, it actually disrupts your sleep at night because caffeine has a pretty long half life. And so, if you're someone who doesn't metabolize caffeine very quickly either, it's going to really extend the effects of caffeine. And, the synapses of your brain are going to keep firing and it's going to create that insomnia for you. So, it also depends on how you metabolize caffeine. There are some people who can metabolize caffeine pretty quickly, and that's why some people can have it later in the day and completely be fine and go to sleep. Whereas majority of people having caffeine past noon, not a good thing. Consuming caffeine every day can create negative neurotransmitter adaptations as well in your brain, and in turn cause you to feel tired and sleepy. So, since caffeine is plugging up those adenosine receptors, the brain starts feeling overstimulated. And it's because it's blocking the adenosine from, attaching to those receptors. So if your brain is getting this overstimulation and feeling, overly excited, it's like we need more adenosine in the body. We need to like calm down. We need to lessen our energy. And so we've created this imbalance and our body's like, let's make more adenosine. And so then we start getting more adenosine created and so that it can attach to those receptors as well. And that's where we get that extreme fatigue, especially when the receptors are then, open for the adenosine. It's going to come flooding in and you're going to get that extreme crash that happens. And you can just start to have extreme fatigue, even if you have your caffeine. So please let me know if that makes any sense at all. But obviously, we want to have our neurotransmitters in balance. We don't want our body to try to make up for things because of this false event happening, where we're having caffeine taking over the receptors for adenosine. So we really, really want to have our body be resilient and, be in the most natural state possible. So we don't want to create any imbalances within our neurotransmitters. And a lot of our neurotransmitters are also made in our gut microbiome. So if our microbiome, is then working harder to create adenosine, things can start to go a little weird in our gut microbiome too. So everything's connected, right? So this disruption to our neurotransmitter, like I mentioned, affects our gut microbiome since the gut and the brain talk, which then can create a vicious cycle. And we can start to see more things become out of balance. So caffeine is also a common gastric irritant, which can contribute to stomach and mucosal degradation. So, you know, some of that mucosal barrier that lines our GI tract can start to deplete and get eaten away at. And we want to have the mucosal barrier there. We want to have it nice and thick because our gut bacteria, they thrive within this mucous membrane. Um, uh, and so we want to make sure that it's not getting lesser and lesser because once we have that degradation of the stomach mucosa, then we start to see more inflammation arise. We can start to see more of that leaky gut, and then more problems arise. And for a lot of us with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, and chronic conditions, we already have leaky gut. We have a disrupted gut microbiome. Our mucosa is likely already very thin, and we don't want to lose any more of it because again, it creates so many problems. So for those, it can also, overstimulate our adrenal glands too. And I've done videos on adrenal dysfunction and insufficiency, and adrenal burnout. And so for those who do have adrenal burnout, which is a lot of us, it's recommended that we remove caffeine for several months and allow the body to recover, as caffeine can be very detrimental to our adrenal glands. And again, create more stress on the body, amp up that cortisol. Caffeine's a big stimulant and a big stressor on the body, so it can increase that cortisol and lead to more burnout and, again, that extreme fatigue. Also, if you're a coffee drinker, here's another problem that we need to address: mold and mycotoxins. So, unfortunately, a lot of coffee beans are filled with molds and mycotoxins from the way that the areas and regions that they are produced in, like humid conditions. Fungi, they thrive in humidity, right? And wetness. So the beans get picked, they already have these fungi, then they're, put in these areas to be shipped. They're being a lot of times, the coffee beans that are shipped, they're in containers for a long time, so things can start to accumulate even more before they're like cooked or roasted and all of that. So we can start to get more fungi and mold and mycotoxins become produced on it. So storage is a problem. The harvesting time can be a problem. The raging can be a problem. So we want to be cognizant of that. Mycotoxins are the toxic chemical that molds produce that are commonly grown in crops that have long storage processes like grains, corn, and coffee beans, like I just mentioned. So one of the big mycotoxins is ochratoxin, or ochratoxin A. It is one of the major mycotoxins that's found in coffee beans, but there are others that are found as well, like aflatoxin as well. And in a 2009 study from Batista et al., they found that 56% of 128 different coffee samples contained the ochratoxin A. So ochratoxin A can cause kidney damage, liver damage, cancer, suppress your immune system, can cause nervous system toxicity, including blood-brain barrier damage and central nervous system effects. Hi, we're already having all of these problems, right? And we're now making them worse because of these molds and mycotoxins. And we likely pick up molds in different areas as well. Whether it's where you live and you've had mold issues, these toxins can really start to accumulate in our body. So ochratoxin can also cause genetic damage, along with more things. Mycotoxins can also lead to symptoms like asthma, chronic fatigue syndrome, night sweats, dizziness, hair loss, pink eye, brain fog, so much more. There's, it's pretty endless with the symptoms that can go on. Another potential problem with coffee is that it can trigger sensitivities for people with gluten sensitivity. So a lot of us with autoimmune conditions, and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and even just general chronic conditions, um, gluten is a huge problem, and it's becoming more and more of a problem for people in society. Coffee, especially instant coffee, it has a similar protein structure to gluten, and therefore, it can be recognized like gluten is in the body. So, roasted and ground coffees are also culprits for cross reactivity of caffeine in coffee. So, again, your body sees it like gluten, and then you have those similar symptoms as if you had been um, exposed to gluten and had gluten in your diet. So if you're someone who struggles with gluten sensitivity, which a lot of us do, like I mentioned, coffee can also be acting as a problem too. So the processing of coffee itself may contribute to the cross sensitivity, as studies have shown that organic and whole bean coffees do not produce the same level of cross reactivity issues. So like I mentioned, it can be seen like gluten and therefore trigger an inflammatory response for people, create more digestive issues, brain fog, fatigue, headaches, etc. And usually these symptoms that people experience that I just mentioned will lead for people to actually grab more coffee because they're like, I'm exhausted. I have a headache. Caffeine can help get rid of my headache. Or, I can't think clearly. I need better mental performance. And caffeine can help, or coffee can help with that. And people then reach for more. And it's this vicious cycle that's really just depleting you even more. So I do want to mention with the mold and mycotoxins, there are better coffees out there that test for mycotoxins, and I can provide you with a list for those on Friday. Um, but there is, like, I use here in Minnesota, Cameron's Coffee. They're very transparent, very take a lot of caution with their growing process, the processing, all of that, storage, and they do tests for mold and mycotoxins. I think Fabula Coffee is a Swiss method of making creating their coffee and coffee beans, and so they don't have the mold and mycotoxins either. I think Bulletproof is another brand, but again, I will give you an updated list on Friday. So today was more of a short little spiel, a little training, which is not common for me. But I hope that you found this to be helpful. And, if you're someone who is a regular caffeine consumer, it might it might be beneficial to start to wean off, give your body a couple months, and then slowly, try it. Add a little bit in on a day, give it a couple days, and wait and see how your body responds to it. And you might really realize that caffeine was, actually feeding into your symptoms more than it was helping, especially when it comes to the fatigue, brain fog, GI issues, and what have you. So I hope that you found this beneficial. Again, this is something that needs to be talked about more. Yes, caffeine, and coffee, they do have some great benefits, but when we're consuming them every day, those benefits a lot of times, and in heavier consumption, those benefits start to get erased. So we want to maintain those benefits. We want to have the high quality coffee, or teas, and we want to allow our body to actually utilize this instead of being bombarded with it. So again, I hope that you found this helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. Have a wonderful rest of your June, wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and have a very happy and safe 4th of July. All right, you guys, take care, and until next time.